Hey, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. You're here for another edition of What's It Like? My name is Jay Liebenguth. I'm your host, and today we've got another great guest for you, another person that you want to know what's it like. Heather Holmes joins us today. Heather, thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
I love your t-shirt. It says Feminist with a to-do list. What would that mean to you?
Absolutely. You're not the first one that has asked me that question. I wear it out in our community a lot, and people say, oh, really, what's your to-do list? And then they're always pretty surprised to hear that I have a list. So for me, I think it's really the time for women to rise and step up just in our world and our community. I think we see a lot of hurt right now and different things happening in our world, and I think women can really jump in and provide some of the compassion that we need. So my to-do list would really be just loving everyone as individuals more. And also, I'm very passionate about politics and making sure there's more women in that arena and at the table, because I love collaboration. And so I want men in those roles, and I also want women. I just want to see a bigger balance of that.
It makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, it's roughly a 50-50 population.
Absolutely.
Why wouldn't there be more of that? And I'm not sure if we'll ever figure out why there isn't more balance. I understand masculine energy and those kinds of things, but you talked when we first met about whether or not you were an activist or whether or not you were just passionate. What would you think?
I would say I'm definitely an activist. I think what takes you from passion to activism is stepping out, right? Using your dollars, your financial commitment to go towards organizations or topics that really mean a lot to you, speaking out, doing spots like this, with you, where I have a platform to share my opinions and my voice. Yeah. I actually think women have tipped the balance a little bit with masculine and feminine energy, and I understand that. I think women have taken on a lot of masculine energy in that role to be more ego-focused and me first and push through because they had to. That's the world they lived in.
Right.
Future generations before me, and I'm so grateful for those women. But at the same time, I think now we need to tilt back a little bit and realize we can still be amazing leaders as women, but we have to drop into that heart-centered leadership and compassion. There's no reason you can't excel and run a top company and be amazing, but make sure you're taking care of humans first. And we've stopped taking care of each other as humans and focus on other aspects. And I think that's why you're seeing so much of killing the environment and the abuse against women. And so I think that's a role women have to accept and really take back on and work in collaboration with all genders, of course.
I think that collaboration piece is the important part of it, because I would invite all women to help us as men see that compassion, that empathy piece, because that doesn't make a person weak. It makes them stronger, actually.
Yes, and giving men permission to drop into that too. As a mom of two boys, I always, I want them to have permission to embrace that part of themselves and not think they can't cry when they get hurt or
Right.
Boys will be boys. Let's start having the same expectations. And even the things we're teaching our daughters to be safe, teach our sons the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. You mentioned about being a mom. What's that like, and how does that, you gave us a little glimpse into that.
Yeah.
What is that like, and how does that flavor your involvement?
It's been the biggest lesson, I think, of my entire life. I was surprised that I was a mom. It never was really in my life plan. But having both of my boys has taught me, I think, more than any college degree I've gotten or any, work I've done with organizations. They keep me grounded.
Yeah.
My boys bring me back to reality every single day, and it's a big responsibility when you get up every day and you realize this next generation, I need to raise good citizens, and you don't know if you're doing the right thing every day or if you're making the best choice. And I always say, as much as I love being their mom, they came into this world with their own agenda.
Right.
right? So as much as I can frame them and give them my opinions and talk to them, I always tell my friends, my job really is to make sure they have food and clothes and they go to school and, help guide and frame their experience in this world. But I think they came into the world with their own agenda. So I just want to support them and help them thrive and be exactly who they want to be in the world.
Well, it sounds to me like you've picked up the idea of it as a parent of more than 30 years. That's exactly what.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I think, the playbook
The
right
gist?
there.
Okay,
Yeah, you try to make sure that they're safe, and you try to
There's
make sure.
days it does not feel like that, though.
Yeah, I understand that. And even when they're older, you still want to try and figure out a way to keep them safe and also to see them be who they were meant to be.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned to me you're a member of the LGBT community.
I am.
And I know there's extra letters there now, but
Yep.
we can just keep it at LGBTQ.
IA.
How does that paint a picture of who you are, and how does that impact your advocacy?
I think it gives me a wide perspective of humanity. I really want to hear other people's opinions, and I want people to see that whoever you love. And it's not so much gender, it's really the person. Mm-hmm. And, I have an amazing partner. Her name's Michelle. And it's beyond me still sometimes how people are so hateful and they just don't understand. And so anyone, I'm always say, let's sit down and have a conversation, because our relationship's probably very similar, to other relationships. We struggle with the same things. We have the same conversations. It's just the person you fall in love with.
I think that's a big thing that probably people want to understand is, and I think we're coming into our own on that. Do you believe that? Do you think it's gotten better?
I think as a society, it's gotten way better.
Okay.
I mean, I even feel for my generation, I'm so grateful for all the work that people have done before me in the LGBT community. Yeah. Because for me, I just arrived and I had such an amazing supportive network. They were like, that's amazing. Be who you are. We love you. This is what you want. And I have friends and people I know that wasn't their experience. So I'm so grateful that I feel so loved in my world, mm-hmm. but I understand that's not everyone's situation or reality.
Yeah. How could we change that? How could we better understand? I mean, is it taking a person from that community out to coffee and to try and ask those questions that are niggling at the back of our minds?
Absolutely. And I think you have to, it's person specific, of course, but I always tell people, if you ask me anything, I'll probably tell you. So get ready, because I have an opinion on it and I want to be open and I want to share my experiences, because at the end of the day, we're human and we're here to love each other. I think that's what's so amazing about being human and humanity is the love piece of it. It's the stuff that money can't buy. I'm concerned. I think it is a society we are being more welcoming, right? We're more inclusive. I see my boys' generation even, same-sex marriages and relationships mm-hmm. aren't as big of an issue. But it's really concerning to me when you see some of the things that the current administration's doing. Like just this week, they rolled back a 2014 ruling, Center for Medicare and Medicaid, which recognizes same-sex marriages in long-term care and hospitals. And without those kind of protections and policies, things can go awry very easy. And so I'm concerned about that piece of it.
I'm just not sure what that has to do. I'm not sure what sexual preference has to do with humanity. And what I mean by that is I'm not sure why the long-term care of somebody has anything to do with their sexual preference or who they love. I don't see the connection.
Yeah.
But I know that there are people out there that do see a connection. How can you, and you talk about a project, and I want you to share us with the mm-hmm. project that you're working on, to try and answer, at least within your community, on how that might happen.
Yeah, I think it's being at the table. I even had a meeting with a pastor here in Omaha in the community a few weeks ago. And shared my story and where I'm at and the passion I have for our community and just to bring people together and have everyone at the table. And he said, would you sit on a coalition or a panel with all people of really pretty conservative religious beliefs and bring your perspective. And I said 100 times yes.
Yeah.
Call me, invite me, I'll be there. So I think even in the LGBT community, when we get invited to sit at the table, even if it's uncomfortable or it's something we might not choose, especially in our state in Nebraska, I think we need to show up. We need to sit at that table. We need to share our story and listen to other people's stories too, because it's not my view or their view.
No.
There's something in the middle.
Right.
It's not always black and white. We can meet at the middle, and that's where that compromise comes in, and that's more what life's about than these hard, strong rules one way or another. But we have to be open to listening.
Well, and I think that there's fear. I think everything that I think somebody explained to me one time that, it comes down to fear and love. Those are the only two emotions that really exist.
Yeah.
And everything is either born out of fear and out of love. And at least my religious background talks about God being a deity of love. And so I don't know why the fear piece of it comes out. But why don't we talk specifically about the project you're working on for the long-term care of these folks that don't have other options, it seems.
Yeah. So I'm super excited about this piece of it. When I was in high school, if you would have asked me if I ever was going to work with aging, I would have said never. I remember going to nursing homes and crying. It wasn't a good experience. No. And then for my civics hours, I had to volunteer at a nursing home in Millard. And I fell in love with a woman named Alice. And she had dementia, but I went every week and I painted her nails and then I'd paint her toes. And she showed me everything I was going through as a stressed out senior in high school. She had been there. Right. And she always was like, oh, you'll be fine. That's not a big deal. She had been through it, married, kids, the whole thing. And I would even, after I left and went to college, I came back and visited her. And she didn't know me or remember me, but she always had a great conversation with me. And I just fell in love with her. She was amazing, and she changed my whole path. And I got my degree in recreational therapy because I said, what can I do if I want to paint old women's nails every day? That's what I wanted to do for my career. And I just called around, and they said recreational therapy. And so recreational therapy is much more than painting nails.
Of course.
It's taking recreation and leisure interests and using it in a therapeutic modality, and you work with physical, occupational, and speech therapy. But beyond that, I got the degree, and then I went back to that same nursing home and did my internship, and Alice was still there, and she passed away a week after I came back from my internship. And so I just knew I was on the right path with the elderly, and that really grew into an amazing career. I was a director of recreational therapy for 8 years. I opened another community over in Papillion, and currently I'm doing marketing at an aging community here in town, and I've realized there's a niche, and the LGBT aging community is not being met. Their needs aren't being met. And the hardest thing there is, if you think about the generation that's currently in aging communities, the discrimination they faced has been horrendous. And so I've talked about how, I haven't had that discrimination to the level that other people have, but that generation, even when they came out, it was unheard of. And so now they're going into these aging communities and they're going back into the closet. So they've had these relationships with their partners for 40 and 50 years, and they're scared to show that in aging communities. And I just realized I can't imagine being 80 and Michelle not being able to come see me or hold my hand or hugging me or being open about our relationship. And it's the generation that remembers, gay people in the Holocaust.
Sure.
They lived through Stonewall. They've lived through the AIDS epidemic. They've, came so far and fought so hard. Now in their later years, to have them go back, it makes me sick. And I'm like, I have to do something about this because it's everything I love. it's my LGBT community, it's the aging, it's exactly where I need to be.
So what would that look like? Would that be a separate facility? Would it be a facility within a facility? What would that look like
So I
for
see
you?
it as twofold for me.
Okay.
I'm just on the beginnings of it, but there is an amazing organization in New York called the SAGE organization, and it's advocacy for LGBT aging. And the state of New York actually just approved funding for 2 LGBT aging communities. And while I don't know if that's the direction it would happen in Nebraska, I really would like to see a brick and mortar community committed to LGBT aging and a community that's open. So even if everyone there doesn't say, yes, I'm in the LGBT aging community, that they're open to it. You know, that it's just more, we're all humans. Let's love each other and take care of each other. And then also the second fold, I think it's cultural competency and education.
Yeah.
So going into those communities, because we have many, many aging communities here, even in Omaha, in Nebraska, and going in and just educating the staff and saying, you might have a resident who's gay or who's lesbian. Let's talk about their experience and just try and create some of that empathy for them. This has been their experience. What can you do as their caregiver just to make sure they're safe and taken care of and they don't feel like they can't be their true self?
Yeah. Well, I would assume, and I don't know if this, I hope that will be a stopgap measure, that people's awareness and understanding and empathy will likely create less of a need for having separate facilities. Maybe?
I think so. I've thought about that. I've gone back and forth a lot on that idea. Do I need a specific community for LGBT? And as I dig into the research and I dig into the, papers and understanding, I think right now we still do need that brick and mortar place for populations.
All right, look into your crystal ball. How long will we need that? Is that 10 years? Is it 20 years?
I think
40 years?
Yeah, I would say 40 or 50 years. I think it's slower. It's a slower process than I think we want, but we've come so far, which is amazing and exciting. And, within the past 10 years, even, the legalization of, gay marriage in America and those protections have been amazing. But the aging population, the baby boomers, we're just starting to see them turn 65, and it's a topic we're not going to be quiet about for many years now.
Right.
I always I taught in college for a while in the gerontology department at UNO, and I always told my students, I said, if you think we're talking about Medicare and Medicaid now, get ready, because it's a huge population that we need to talk about and how we're going to care for them, and the LGBT aging needs to be at that table because it's part of that population, and I would hate to see them feel like they can't be their true selves or they have to go back in the closet at 80 years old.
Yeah, I don't know where that goes. I would hope that anybody who has a problem, at a time there was black people couldn't get a transfusion or all those things that were
couldn't get married.
Hopefully in our distant past, but we're still experiencing it. Your community is still experiencing that. What is that going to take? How is that going to be made relevant moving forward? Or is it just time?
I think it's time. I think it's education. I think it's talking about it. And I think people just don't realize it. A lot of times, even in my current role, I'll say, yes, this is my passion. I'm going to open an LGBT community for the aging in Omaha. And some people will say, LGBT what? And they're not aware still of the acronym even, or that there's a whole group of gay people in America. And so I have to take a step back and say that's their reality. Like, we all live in our own realities.
That's right.
And so I think that's something I really saw even in this past election was I had patted myself with a community and a tribe of people who are very like-minded, but that doesn't help because all those people are rallying. I have their support. They think I'm on the right path. So it's getting out into other communities and other people who have different opinions and just sitting down and talking with them. And it doesn't have to be a screaming match, and it doesn't have to be them versus us, Republican versus Democrat, women versus men.
Yeah.
None of that. It has to be, we're all human. Let's sit down and talk. And we don't even have to agree at the end of the day. You can still say, Heather, that's crazy. You're opening a community for gay people. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. And I can say, that okay, but you listened to me. And maybe I planted a seed, or I was able to plant or change their mind a little bit. That's enough.
I love that you're trying to get that done in Omaha. Typically things happen on the coast and move inward. And I don't know how much of it's being done on the coast even right now.
Yep.
But it sounds to me, if you're on the nascent edge of trying to get that done, that we still have work to do there.
We have a lot of work to do, because out of 2.5 million aging communities, 500 maybe are focused on LGBT issues in America. There's a community in Florida, one in California. DC is just now opening one that's like 20 beds, very small, and then the two big communities in New York.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a population in the Midwest, and not even Omaha, Des Moines, Minneapolis, Kansas City. So just pulling that in and finding resources. It's a niche population, but it's super important because it's part of humanity and it's people that need to be taken care of.
Right. I don't want to let you go without talking a little bit about your yoga community, because that seems to be a different community and an interesting community that probably flavors a lot of who you are. What can you tell us about that?
I think it flavors everything, who I am. So yoga for me, a lot of times people think yoga and they think postures and yoga pants and all of that. But for me, yoga is a philosophy. The asana, the postures are a piece of that. Sure. But for me, it's really a lifestyle, and it's living to not harm and to love everyone. I am a yoga instructor and I teach. I think the big push for me would be meditation and relaxation beyond anything. I think as a society, we don't need more movement, and we're seeing more movement in yoga and more commercialization in the West, and that's not the philosophy that was brought over. I think we need to slow down, sit down, relax, and meditate, and really sit with ourselves. I think there's so much.
I know my favorite part of the yoga is the Shavasana.
It is Shavasana. It's relaxation, and it's called corpse pose for a reason. It teaches us how to die and let go every day. Yeah. So the more you sit with yourself, and we have so much happening in our world. So if we can sit with ourselves and sit with issues, and we don't have to have an answer. We don't have to be comfortable even. Mm-hmm. But if we can just sit in that quiet and know this will pass, and an answer will come, or if it doesn't, that's fine too. But we need to be able to quiet down a little bit and not always talk.
So the show is a talking show, by the way, but it's called What's It Like? Yeah. So I would ask you, what's it like to be Heather Holmes?
It's amazing to be me. I am so grateful every day. I've had really hard challenges in my life. I've taken different paths, but at this point where I'm at, I feel so confident in knowing I can support the LGBT aging community. I love being a mom. I have amazing friends. So to be Heather Holmes is amazing.
Do you ever feel as if it's harder for you to be in love than anyone else? I mean, is it harder as an LGBTQ person to be in love?
No.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. It's humanity, right? It's looking at a person and not seeing just them, but you see their soul. When I look at my partner, Michelle, she brings out everything in me that I don't see. When I first fell in love with her, she said, "Oh, you as a mom." She was like, "I see how much your kids love you. And, the way they snuggle with you and support you, and it's amazing." And I didn't even see myself as that kind of mom. So it's like every other relationship. You see the best of them, and they bring the best out in you.
I guess the other question I want to know is, do you feel comfortable sharing your love in public, where you work? I mean, is that something that takes time to get through, to get over?
Yeah, I think some of it's personality. Mm-hmm. I think if you ask any gay, lesbian, transgender person, they all would have a different answer to that, Jay. For me, it's not an issue at all. I have always been very confident in saying my opinions and expressing love. So for me, I have no issue. Even at my company, my supervisor, I told her my passion is opening this community, and she's like, go for it. I love it. And she said, bring in the roundtables to talk about it here in our community. She's like, I want this to be an open community.
Yeah, good for her.
So she's super supportive. So I personally don't. The people who are uncomfortable with it, it's other people in the community, but that's not going to stop me from loving who I love.
Right. One of the things I really appreciate your openness. I really appreciate your enthusiasm, and I appreciate who you are. What could we do to help you?
I think be open-minded. I'm sorry,
that's not possible.
I think if something rises up within us, notice it. If I'm out and about and I'm holding my girlfriend's hand or I'm kissing Michelle and it makes you uncomfortable, take a minute and say, why am I uncomfortable with this? And then sit with that and understand what is it within you that has a problem with that, and see if you can settle with it. Yeah. And I have that all the time. When I see people make comments or, have a different opinion, I say, Heather, why is this striking you so much? And then see, can you frame it from their experience? So try and walk in my shoes for a minute. Step out of yourself and say, what if I was Heather? What would that look like? How would that feel with her experiences? And I think if we all took a minute to step back and say, wow, look what they've lived through. And I do it all the time in my aging communities because an 80-year-old woman has a much different experience than me.
Yeah.
So I say, wow, what has she gone through that's brought her to today? And then I can understand her opinions in a much more loving way.
Heather, best of luck to you.
Thank
I
you.
really hope you'll come back and tell us about your success.
Anytime.
Putting together this community.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Hey, thanks for tuning into What's It Like. As your host and producer, I really want to make this show interesting and relevant. And so we need your help. We need your ideas. We need your connections. We need your feedback. Who or what would make a good show? What topics do you feel challenged by? And how could we shed some light on them? Do you know someone interesting that would be a great interview? Well, if you have an answer for any of these, it's easy enough to connect with us. Go to our Facebook page, which is that @ What's It Like to Be, or drop us an email at whatsitlikeshow@gmail.com. Again, thanks for tuning in.